Evening, everyone, and welcome to the Kenyon Family Town Hall. I hope your student has enjoyed the first month of school, and we are very pleased that you were able to join us this evening, that you've chosen to join us to hear about the upcoming year at Kenyon. My name is Nikki Selden, and I am joined this evening with my husband, Brian Selden. Our daughter is a senior this year at Kenyon. She is a part of the class of 2025. And so this is our fourth year as members of the Kenyon Parents Council, our second year as its chairs. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian for just a few minutes to tell you a little bit about our Kenyon experience.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Selden. I go with Nikki and with our student Katie, as Nikki said. For those of you who are asking yourselves or asking each other, what's the Kenyon Parents Council? It's a group of parents who are committed to doing what we can to support the academic mission of the college, whether that's financially, whether that's in career development for students, whether that's in other projects. If that sounds like something that's interesting to you, please feel free to reach out to Nikki or I, including over family weekend, where we will hopefully see many of you in person in just about a month. As Nikki said, our daughter is entering the fall, or is in the fall of her senior year at Kenyon, and that's made this really a bittersweet experience for us. Expect we've got parents and families here from students throughout their Kenyon voyage. And something that we've done this fall is look back on what Kenyon has meant to us and to our student. We remember the early days, the nervousness, what's a dorm going to be like, what's a roommate going to be like, what if I don't like the food? And what we found is that relatively quickly, our daughter and the friends that she was able to make, recognized that Kenyon was a place of just extraordinary opportunity for students, whether it's athletics, whether it's research, whether it is leadership, whether it's the performing or visual arts. Kenyon, at least in our experience, has kind of more opportunity available per student than just about any other school that our daughter's friends or our other friends' children have encountered. And we feel very fortunate that our daughter's been able to participate in the active life on the Kenyon campus. That was her first year. At the end of her second year, we had probably the ultimate bittersweet college experience. Some of you may have even heard Nikki or I share this because it was so impactful for us, is that at the end of her sophomore year, our daughter came home just bawling, very upset. And you ask, well, what's the matter? It's like, I'm halfway done. I don't want to be halfway done. I love my experience so much. And as she's now entering her senior year and we're reflecting back, it really has been a marvelous 3 years. And we are thrilled that we've been able to participate in this journey so far and want to do what we can to make sure that other students and other families get to experience what our daughter and our family has been able to experience on the Hill.
So now I am very pleased to introduce Kenyon's 20th president, President Julie Kornfeld, who is just a few weeks away from her 1-year anniversary at the college.
1 week.
1 week, 1 week. Oh, wait. Prior to her arrival at Kenyon, she was the Vice Provost for Academic Programs at Columbia University and the Vice Dean for Education at Columbia's Bowman School of Public Health, where she was also an Associate Professor of Epidemiology with a distinguished record as a researcher and educator. At Kenyon, she has been focusing on implementing the current strategic plan while continuing to be a vocal advocate for the power of a liberal arts education. On top of all that, I can tell you she is an excellent human, and easy for me to say that Brian and I are thrilled to have her leading Kenyon into the third century. It's third century. So without further ado, President Julie Kornfeld.
Thank you. Thank you, Nikki. And thank you, Brian, both for the kind introduction and for all of your amazing work that you do on behalf of the college. It is truly exceptional, and we love having you involved, and thank you. I welcome everyone. I'm delighted that you could join us tonight. I am so proud and excited to introduce you to some of my remarkable colleagues. They are doing work, amazing work here to make sure that your students are having a great experience here on campus. And I can tell you that the semester is off to a great start. The fall is in the air. Not quite the picture that you saw when you we're not quite there yet, but I will say this morning as I walked into my office, there were leaves on the ground and there's a little bit of crispness in the air. And yesterday, by the way, it was 85 degrees on campus at the field hockey game. But we are, I think, heading into fall, which is such a beautiful time on campus. And I know that your students are going to enjoy the beautiful start to the semester. Next weekend is homecoming. Last weekend, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of our Hillel house here, and we had sporting events all weekend. And next weekend will promise us to be a really busy time on campus with homecoming weekend and the return of many of our alum and our football game and all sorts of exciting activities. But as Nikki mentioned, I joined the Kenyon community last October. It has been an incredible journey as I enter complete my first year. I have felt very welcomed here in the community. This is a very special place. Certainly true also for my husband and our dog, Milo, who knew nothing but parks and sidewalks in New York City before coming to Ohio, but now loves his walks on Middle Path and all the love and attention that he gets from your students. I can always tell a student who is missing their own puppy at home as they come up to me and ask to pet Milo, and they're always a little teary sometimes when they talk to the dog. But I can all tell you that this is an exciting semester. I truly believe, and I'm here because I think Kenyon has an incredibly strong foundation from which to educate your children. I believe there's no better place for a young person to try to make sense of a world than a residential liberal arts college like Kenyon. And we really believe deeply that colleges should be places of debate and discussion. And you can imagine as we enter an exciting election year and coming out of difficult times in the moment in the world, that we believe very strongly that exchanging views is essential to the learning process. And colleges should be places where students can attend their classes, take part in campus life, and without feeling targeted or threatened in any way. And I can assure you that Kenyon is committed to ensuring that both are true, that we can speak and learn, but also never feel targeted or threatened. So one parent asked about this in advance of the call. So I do want to be clear that Kenyon will never hesitate to intervene and enforce our policies about harassment and intimidation. But I also want to share with you that the reports of disruption that you heard about last year on college campuses do not reflect what we saw here at Kenyon throughout the year and what we continue to see. Our community has truly remained committed to dialogue. The students are incredibly bright, educating themselves on the issues that they are most passionate about, and they respond thoughtfully and respectfully to one another, even when they disagree. And I've seen that throughout my time here, and very proud about that. I think my greatest hope for this fall is that we each try to understand each other and how different people think about complex issues, how those differences can and should lead to more discussion. I'm teaching a public health class this semester for the first time. I have 12 students in my class. And one of the first things we touch on in that class is listening to different points of view, drawing insights from within the community and across fields. And most importantly, working together to find solutions to our world's toughest problems, in my case, the public health problems that we're talking about in class. So working together is key. And with that, I'm thrilled to have members of Kenyon's senior staff with us tonight. We will dive into the academic and residential experience here and how they work together to ensure that your students receive the support and the tools that they need to be successful. And I think you'll enjoy hearing from them throughout this hour. So before we get started, just a reminder that you're all on mute to preserve the audio quality of the call, but we do want to hear from you. And this is a big group. So please ask questions in the chat to make sure we see it. For those of us who are moderating and talking, it's hard for us to manage the chat ourselves. So please feel free if you have questions to add them there. So I'm going to start by introducing our provost, Jeff Bowman. He joined Kenyon's faculty as a member of the history department in 1997 and has served as our chief academic officer since 2020. So Jeff, I talked a little bit, but perhaps you could share how Kenyon's academic programs help students develop the skills they need to navigate complex issues and give a little insight behind the curtain how things are going here on the academic side.
Sure. Thank you, Julie. It's great to see you all. I've been at Kenyon for a little bit more than 25 years, and I love it here. It's great to be part of the academic program. And you probably don't become a person who becomes a provost or a faculty member at a college without like loving the start of the academic year. It's very thrilling when school starts, and I'm kind of surprised to find that we're already sort of 3 weeks in, and so we've made a bunch of progress, and it's been a very good start to the semester with lots of very positive information and energy from faculty and students. And as Julie mentioned, one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is the fact that this kind of education, the small residential liberal arts college, really is especially good at helping students think about how to navigate complex issues, particularly through having small inquiry-based classes that are focused on critical thinking, on oral and written presentation, on evaluation of evidence, on interdisciplinarity, and on dialogue. And sometimes this is very explicit in the format of what the course is. So you can think about political science courses like Quest for Justice, or an American Studies course on prisons and policing, or a sociology course on environmental sociology or public health, or a philosophy course on ethics. But really, these like habits of mind and thoughtful conversation and inquiry are baked into the entire curriculum and burble up in physics or classics or environmental studies or the study of literature. So it's everywhere in the curriculum. And then it's also in other places. So to give you just one example of ways in which we try to kind of support the moral of this kind of engagement and this kind of thoughts about navigating difficult conversations. Friday this week, we have a Kenyon alumnus, a person named Jim Tull, who's an experienced practitioner and consultant in international conflict management and has been a negotiator in hostage release situations around the world and mediated many high-level international conflicts. And he's going to give a presentation that will be open to everyone, basically on how it is you handle hard conversations. And again, he's been involved in the hardest possible conversations that you can be having. Another thing that I'd mention would be the way in which we build these kind of muscles for rigorous inquiry through experiential learning. And there are a lot of ways in which we do this, but one of the most palpable and obvious is through opportunities in the summer that students have to participate in a bunch of different programs, like summer science, where they work in a faculty member's labs. We've got a science and nature writing program in the summer. We have collaboration with the Ohio State University, where some of our students work in the labs at the James Cancer Center. And we have another set of students who work on legal questions through the John Adams Summer Legal Scholars. And I'm going to try to put in the chat a link that just gives you a list of some of the things that Kenyon students were working on in the past, over the course of the summer in these various programs. And I think it'll be a very nice indicator to you of the kinds of students, the work that students do with independent and mentored research with Kenyon faculty members and other experts. Like, let me see, I think I've got that there. So take a look at that, and that should give you a sense of the ways in which some of our students are building their independent research and critical thinking skills. So thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm going to keep moving on. I noticed that someone has raised their hand, and I would ask that since we're going to go through the program, that if you have a question for us, you would put it in the chat. It'll be a little bit easier for us to go through the program. So I'm going to turn my attention to Vice President Celestino Limas. And I think, as you all know, we're a fully residential college, and living and learning together is kind of the foundation of our community. I want to share with you some exciting news. We will be opening 2 new residence halls on Kenyon's campus in our historic South Quad within the next year. I toured one of those facilities just last week, and they are quite beautiful, built for sustainability and really designed to meet the needs of today's students, with more apartment and suite style rooms and common areas for groups and organizations to collaborate. And they have truly beautiful views of the campus when you're inside the room, and they're quite lovely. So when you come to campus, I invite you to visit and tour them, and we will have students moving into them starting in January 2025 for the first one, and the fall of 2025 for the second group. So let me introduce Vice President Celestino Limas, who joined Kenyon as Vice President for Student Affairs in 2021. I will put a similar question to you, Celestino. Kenyon graduates often become change agents in their community. How does Kenyon's residential experience prepare them to build thriving communities that welcome all perspectives? And I also will ask you, while I'm thinking of it, if you would talk a little bit, in addition to the new residence halls, there's been some new additions to some of our common spaces and social spaces, and maybe you can speak to that as well in our existing dorms. Thank you.
All for that, Julie. Great to see everyone this evening. Fantastic to, I think, be with you all, of course, talk about the favorite topic that I have, which is your children. The funny thing about, I think, what Jeff was speaking about right now, and I think you all probably can understand this, Kenyon students don't operate in silos. And so that inquisitive nature that Jeff was just speaking of, it transcends into the residence halls from the classroom, but also the dining hall, Chalmers Library, Lowry Center. And so what we try and do in Student Affairs is provide, really, I think, complementary experiences so the students can pursue those topics that are of interest to them. Sometimes they're going to be truly extracurricular and social. Sometimes they're going to be co-curricular. And I think for us in particular on a campus like Kenyon, it really creates a unique opportunity to really delve into some of those topics in really shepherded ways. Here's what I mean. The way in which I think our residential program is set up, we understand and we appreciate that really deep conversations are going to happen with faculty members like us during the day. But there's something also, I think, very vulnerable that happens between 9 p.m. and midnight in the corner of a residence hall when students are on the lounge sort of thinking about something that maybe they're reading online. And there, I think, are really opportunities for students to be shepherds in some of those conversations that are built around the residence hall experience. As Julie mentioned, the physical structure of those spaces is very important. We have beautiful new residence halls coming online, but we've made strong investments to our more traditional halls, whether it be new fixtures in Hannah, Leonard, Old K, the classic side of Kenyon we talked about, or renovations to the Gunner Dome, Mather McBride lounges, the Gun Commons patio on the north side of campus. We want to make sure that our spaces are set up for students to really delve into some topics in ways that can facilitate some really great conversations. On the student side, in terms of who are going to be shepherding those conversations, our community advisors are a stellar group of young people. And I would encourage you, if you have young people that are just now matriculating as first years, encourage them to really get to know not just their CA, but what it means to serve as a CA. We've seen in the past 4 years a fantastic turnaround in terms of students really seeing the CA position as really that of a student leader. It is not someone that sort of, when you think about maybe our residence life experience years ago, where you had the RA that was interested in writing students up, that's not what our CAs do. Our CAs really are there to make sure that students are really thinking about things deeply, critically, but also they're extending their classroom experience and sort of having these true interdisciplinary experiences on campus. So as a point of reference to prove this to you, this past spring for this academic year, in addition to all of the students that were returning, we have 50 CAs across campus. 13 of those were going to be new hires because we were having 37 returners fill the slots. Of the 13 new positions we hired, we had 130 applications. This, I think, is just another piece of evidence as to how much students really value being supports for their peers and also being well trained to make sure they can navigate those conversations. You can imagine being a CA this academic year has a lot of gravity attached to it because, of course, you have the upcoming anniversary of 7 October. You also have on 5 November a pretty significant election that's going to be occurring. We have students lined up to try and make sure that they can facilitate some of these conversations for our students. And I think it's a real testament to how much students really want to be a part of their peers' experience. Now, in particular, I will say that I think our students are very much so enthusiastic about putting their own fingerprints on the residential experience. So all those renovations I talked about to existing residence hall structures and the new residence halls we built, those have student fingerprints on the design because we want to make sure that the actual users of those spaces are actually having voice in those processes as well. And our students are not shy about wanting to engage in that process. We're really proud about that. Going a step further with that, I think you will be proud to know that your students are very much so enthusiastic about being part of how their actual academic experience can intertwine so well to the residential one. We've had students that have been talking with us for many years about the Kenyon Access Initiative and how it can actually be a better representation of their residential experience. So when I first started here in 2021, we had 6 residence hall rates, and the delta between the most expensive and the least expensive was $4,000. So then President Sean Decatur and I started thinking, how can we mitigate that? We have one rate for tuition. We don't practice differential tuition here. We have one rate for board. What if we had one rate for housing? And our students jumped into this very much so with enthusiasm. And so we're happy to say we're now beginning a transition period where this year we have 3 residence hall rates. So we're going to have the delta go from 4,000 between most expensive and least. This year it's 2,000, and then fall of 26, we're transitioning to one rate housing. That's due to students collaborating with Todd Bursner, CFO, myself, and a number of the great colleagues to make sure that we can actually live our values. And then coinciding with that, you may have read in the Collegian recently that student government for the past 2 years have been working with me to roll in laundry prices into that. So fall of 26, students will be able to do laundry for free. So that can be one topic you can actually now talk to your students about. There is no reason here why they can actually be doing a good job staying on top of their laundry. But I think those are some just clear examples of how our students really want to be co-authors of their experience here. And that's a fantastic thing I think about serving at a place like Kenyon. In addition to that, I think you made a really good point, Julie, talking about how I think our students are really wanting to make sure that they can be in safe environments. But I will say I am so proud of how our students this past year and this fall as well have been very vocal about wanting to make certain that they show respect to each other. They don't just want to tolerate other people's viewpoints, they want to actually appreciate that. So it always warms my heart whenever I walk Middle Path, either in the middle of the day or in the evening when my wife and I will be on campus, and students are asking questions, but tell me why you think about that. Show me your evidence. Tell me about your experience. That I think is really indicative of how much students want to actually be a part of each other's lives here. And that actually, I think, makes them better citizens because they understand that where they end, someone else begins. And that kind of student body, you really can't put a price on.
Thank you so much, Celestino. Speaking about, I think, our students as citizens, I was going to ask Jeff if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about the opportunities we're offering students this fall. Again, this is an exciting election period, as you know. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to be on a college campus during an election year, to actually have opportunities, formal opportunities and impromptu opportunities to talk about the issues that are facing our nation. So Jeff, would you mind talking a little bit about, we've got quite a full calendar, so I'd love for you to share that with the group.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. It's super exciting, and I just, so you know, typically in terms of things that get me really politically engaged, like the 12th century is about as late as I go. So that these things on campus that we're talking about are really, it's really a remarkable program. So some of these things that would resonate with students about the current political world are curricular offerings, and so we have a new faculty member who joined us last year, Zach McGee, who's teaching a course on campaigns and elections this semester. And actually the students who are enrolled in that course are going to assist the Knox County Board of Elections setting up machines on election day. We also have courses on democracy in crisis, on modern democracy, on news media and American politics, on civil wars and failed states, all things that are fairly focused, in addition to other offerings in political science and sociology and anthropology. And in addition to that, some of the offerings about things that our Center for the Study of American Democracy have done in terms of specific, so these aren't courses, these are things that are open to everyone, have been really remarkable. They hosted a Kenyon Votes Week that had a bunch of activities that were focused on student voting. They organized voter registration tables in Pierce. There are 2 students who are CSAT associates, the associates in this thing that produce the 6th iteration of a nonpartisan election guide. And this year it's going to be published in collaboration with Knox Pages, the local kind of online newspaper. And so there are a couple of students that do work as associates in the CSAT to promote this work. And they also organized a debate watch party that brought 150 students together to watch the first presidential debate. So that was exciting. And then in addition to those kind of programmatic things, they're bringing in a remarkable series of speakers. Retired faculty member, long-term faculty member, Rick Sheffield gave a Constitution Day talk that was about voting rights in Ohio. Michael Gerhardt of UNC is giving a talk on the 2024 presidential election, the Constitution, and the future of American politics. Timothy Snyder at Yale, whom you may know, you may have heard him last week on NPR, where he was giving an interview with Scott Simon that was interrupted by a Russian missile because he was in Kyiv. Or you may have known him for the opinion piece he published yesterday in the Times. Is going to be on campus. He's written a couple of best-selling works, one on tyranny, the other on freedom. He's going to be here giving a public talk and also holding a kind of seminar conversation with people who've read the book that's open to faculty, students, employees, and the community. Kelly Sanders, a retired NBC correspondent, is giving an address on assessing the role of the media in the 2024 presidential elections. And then we have a set of events next semester too that I won't go into as deeply, but Danielle Allen from Harvard is going to be giving an address on bridging the impasse, 21st century practices for a stronger democracy. The Center for the Study of American Democracy has a conference every other year, and they'll be doing one in the coming spring that's focused on immigration. So for students who are interested in the current political environment, or not interested but afraid of the current political environment, or looking for different ways to engage, there's a huge variety of programming that is both in the context of specific coursework, but also available to everyone who's interested in attending these talks and responding to CSAD's outreach.
Thank you, Jeff. There's a lot happening. I have walked through Pierce and seen the students really out there trying to register them to vote. They've got stickers, they've got handouts, and they're really enthusiastic about participating. And for many of them, their first time voting in a presidential election. And so it's quite exciting. I think, Celestino, you've talked a bit about this already, but I think maybe talking a little bit more about the kinds of programs and services that are available in our residential program. So Jeff was talking a little bit more about the academic and co-curricular, but perhaps you can talk a little bit more about what's happening in our residential programs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that dovetails really nicely off of what Jeff was speaking of is this whole notion of how I think community is built around different traditions and also customs. And for here, one thing I want to really sort of expand upon is really the element of food and how actually that brings people together. And it allows, I think, at a place like Kenyon, deep discourse to occur that may not occur at larger institutions or different institutions. So a couple examples here. So one, I would say, all of you know, of course, that Pierce Dining Hall is a foundation of the student experience. But one of the things that's very instrumental is that Pierce is not just a place where students come and eat, but very strategically, there are different folks in student affairs, whether it's our res life professionals, our coaches on our athletic teams, our chaplains. We actually seek out students and we dine with students there as well to make sure that we can actually shepherd some of those conversations. And I think this year in particular, it has been wonderful to see a colleague walk into Pierce, whether it's new side, old side, or the ADR in some of the rooms downstairs. Students gravitate towards us like soup to a spoon, because there are sometimes moments where they're wrestling with different concepts and they simply want to know a little bit more. For me and my colleagues in Student Affairs, we take very seriously the fact that there are moments where we are a proxy for people like you on this call, and we want to make certain that we're showing up in our best selves to make certain that students have some of the guidance and support. We never tell students exactly what to think, but sometimes there's a way in which I think different people like myself and my peers, we can be strategic and encourage students to think about things in a certain way. It always just makes me smile, but also it tees up a conversation whenever a student invites me over to a dining table and they'll be referencing something that they've seen online, whether it's a TikTok video, a story, and it's a reminder to me that students consume information very differently than we do as parents. And sometimes I think there's a way in which conversations can be very instrumental with that. So that's one way I think that peers can be really strong. Another way that really resonates around food, Julie, is the way I think Flats has been a wonderful example, for this. For those of you that don't know, Flats is a student-run bar that opened this year. It has been 3 years in the making. It was a student-generated idea to really try and give people an alternative to some of the house parties that occur on campuses, things of that nature. But also, I saw an opportunity to partner with students to make sure we can feed two birds with the same seed. How do we help underage students that are under 21 understand what responsible consumption looks like so that you don't have a peer pressure of wanting to go out and thinking that you have to go out and get drunk in order to have a good time? But what if myself as a 19-year-old and Julie as a 21-year-old, we can go to Flats on Friday night, we can split a plate of chicken wings, I can watch Julie and enjoying an IPA and really see that she's having a great time. And I know now, oh, okay, when I'm old enough to drink, here's some of the templates that I can use as opposed to pop culture, things of that nature. So they've had actually opened now 3 weekends. And it's actually really telling that we're having this conversation today, because I kid you not, on Sunday, when I was walking on campus in the afternoon, I had 3 students come up to me who were remarking about a conversation they had about the election this fall at Flats. And I think that really shows how much food and drink can bring people together on campus in ways that I think you don't necessarily have at other institutions, because how we are so tight knit. You all have seen me joke about this, but it is true. Kenyon is such, I think, a fantastic community, and being here on purpose in the middle of nowhere, we are very intentional about relationships. So when you think about how students can break bread with each other and let their guard down, we want to make certain that as colleagues in student affairs that complement academic affairs, we can be in those spaces to help students out. And I think Flats is one way we're sort of taking it to that next level and showing students both that you can consume responsibly so that when you're actually making choices about alcohol, you know what to do and to be wise. But also, there are certain moments when you're splitting a beverage with someone that you might actually entertain a question that you wouldn't in a classroom or things of that nature. I think this is really a testament to how much our students show up for each other and how student government has absolutely been supportive of that effort. And then, Julie, just to coincide on this, just to make sure we drive the point home, our chaplains and our counselors in the Cox Center have been fantastic this year at shepherding those moments, because we understand we are going to hold activities and programs and sessions, but we also need to make certain that we are available for when the moments strike. So our chaplains have been wonderful about different hours walking on campus to make sure they can be resources. But I will say that our counselors in the Cox Center have just been magical, nothing short of heroic last year and this year. So when a student reaches out and wants to visit with somebody, not only do we have a wait time that is non-existent, so we have crisis hours for all of our therapists throughout the day. So if someone needs to be seen, they can get seen. But also if someone just wants to talk with somebody and it's not necessarily a crisis or an emergency, we can get that student in as soon as possible with their schedule. So to make sure they can actually have someone to visit with. I am very proud of the fact that over 50% of Kenyon students utilize our counseling center, and the vast majority of those students do so as proactive mental health efforts. So they're not in crises. They really feel like it would help them to have a sounding board of someone who's a clinician, just to talk once a month with exactly how their experience is going. Further testament to why your students are a joy to serve every single day.
Thank you, Celestino. I think you can hear his enthusiasm for the work that he does. So thank you. I'm going to ask Jeff. I think it's really helpful for families to know about these services. Jeff, I was going to ask you maybe to talk a little bit about the Career Development Office. so that as they partner with students in mapping out some of their own professional objectives and the steps that they need to get there. And before you answer that, Jeff, just another quick reminder for people, if you have questions, please type them in the chat under Ask Questions, and we'll try and get to as many of those as we can when we finish up here in our last few questions. So Jeff, turning over to you.
Sure, just a few things about career development. It's relevant. It doesn't happen everywhere, but one of the things that's distinctive about our career development office at Kenyon is that it's in the academic division, so it's overseen by the provost, and it is in a very centrally located location. It's right in the second floor of Chalmers, overlooking the lobby there. So we've really made a lot of moves over the past few years to push forward the career development office, and under the leadership of our dean there, Lee Schott, he's really been very creative, basically about thinking about how to get questions about career development in front of students and in front of faculty members so they can support students. He's recently introduced a new rewards program for students who participate in different things at the career development office. So if they participate in this kind of activity, or if they schedule an appointment or complete an interest form or do a workshop on their CVs or on their resumes, they get points for this that makes them eligible for things. I'm a little bit too interested in it. I'm like, what does it take to get to platinum, and when will they get upgrades, and like, can you transfer them to Marriott? But I'll leave that aside. It seems to be a very exciting thing. He's got other interesting things going on, and this is an example just from this week. One of the very popular things that he introduced was a thing that's called "You Should Do This Internship," which is Kenyon students who have done an internship talking to other Kenyon students. And there are 2 or 3 of these every week. This week, 2 members of the class of 2025 who did internships over the summer held meetings that are going to be for prospective people who might be interested in this. One of them had done an internship at Morgan Stanley in data analytics, and the other had done an internship in post-conflict research center in Sarajevo. So they do very different things, but it's Kenyon students talking to other Kenyon students about shared interests and about the way that that might engage their kind of thoughts about career development to make them earlier and earlier in their 4 years at Kenyon. Coming up in a couple of weeks, we've organized a fall job break shadows. So over fall break, there are some job shadows in Columbus, and the industries include government and politics, media and marketing, nonprofit management, education, financial services, architecture, and natural resources. And these programs have really benefited from the very lively participation of Kenyon alumni and parents, both long-term alumni and recent ones. Also this week, there were 2 alumni from the classes of 22 and 23 who did an information session on working at Morningstar and what that's like. And there were, within this week, basically other sessions that were based on, or that were for students who might be interested in faith-based, mission-driven humanitarian work, law school admissions, and foreign servants careers. So they've done really remarkable programming, and it's got such energy from current Kenyon students who have done internships, from Kenyon families and parents, and also from alumni who are really able to connect the passion of the place with thoughts about what are you going to do next. And so it's exciting. Thank
you. Thanks, Jeff. Very exciting. So I'm going to turn now to some of the questions that have come in while we've been busy talking. So I'm going to read some of these questions and maybe farm them out or answer them myself, depending on what they are. So Celestino, I'm going to throw this one to you. A parent talked about seeing students smoking on campus and wants to know whether this is an issue in Kenyon, and if so, how we're addressing this. So may I throw that one to you?
Yeah, of course. I appreciate the question. I think if Alice Teal, our Senior Director of Wellness, were seated right here with me, she would enjoy talking about this. She and I speak of it often. We don't necessarily have a lot of students who smoke on campus, but when you see one, it tends to sort of stick in your memory for quite a while. It's a bit more of an issue with employees in certain parts of the campus, but for the small number of students who do smoke, we really encourage them to engage in cessation programs through our health center. And I can tell you that a majority of them actually are trying. I think some of you may have struggled with smoking as well in your life as well, and it can be hard to sort of end that. And so I think our folks over in the health center try a variety of things that we can do. We are part of both national efforts and localized ones to ensure that we can do a sort of full blanket approach. Students are needing to try a lot of those things when it comes to, ending their relationship with smoking. And so we want to make sure that we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. For many of our students, part of why I think my colleagues in the health center hypothesize it isn't so much of an issue as it was in the past or at other schools is this. There's a way in which I think when you can actually have your hands occupied, it helps a long way towards students moving away from it. So a lot of our students are very good about hydration and things of that nature. So smoking, the students who do actually do that, we want to make sure we're helping, and we are doing definitely a good approach at that. This does tee me up to remind you all of something that I think is probably a bit more of something that we watch. Edibles is something that is very prevalent among young people these days. So for all the parents out there, I would definitely encourage you over Thanksgiving break, have a conversation if you've not had already with your daughters and sons about their awareness of edibles, things of that nature. In my generation, back when I was in college, the people who consumed marijuana had a certain sort of archetype about them, and there's a way in which their smell sort of followed them. That's not the case anymore if you're consuming cannabis without smoking it. So we really try very hard on campus here to educate students about the impacts of cannabis, because sometimes it is nowhere near as recreational as students may believe through pop culture. So that's where we focus our efforts, as well as trying to make sure we're attentive to smoking cessation. But please keep your head on a swivel about students, about cannabis use when it comes to edibles and gummies, things of that nature.
Thank you. Thank you, Celestino. I know those are things that are on everybody's mind. We had a parent ask about changes that are being made to the senior art exhibition, which has been held at the Gun Gallery in the last few years. So I'll just comment on that for those of you that were interested in that. So we are not canceling the senior art exhibition at the Gun Gallery. The Gun is undergoing some of their own changes as they are moving from an art gallery to a collecting museum, which has some really exciting opportunities for our campus and community in terms of the quality of exhibits and traveling shows and opportunities that we can to participate in museum level work. But we will always have a spot for the students to exhibit their work. Right now we're in the process of kind of just making some changes to what that art exhibition will look like, but it is a commitment to continue to have that art exhibition in the Gun. So please know that that's continuing to be something that we're working on and collaborating with, and that it has not been canceled. So just to clarify that. And moving on to another question. One parent asked about how the college communicates with students and parents about grades throughout the semester. Jeff, maybe you could talk a little bit about what you would recommend for parents looking to know more about their students' academic progress.
So I think the typical answer, which may be a frustrating one, is we don't, at least in part because FERPA, the Federal Education Records Protection Act, says that we shouldn't be communicating basically with you about records involving your student and their participation here. Now, students can sign a waiver at the registrar's office, which means that we would be able to communicate with you, but as a general rule, if you were to call me or a faculty member and say, how is my student doing? Tell me about their grades. Like, we would not actually be able to answer that without, in the absence of this waiver. We might be able to have a conversation basically about what the policies of the course are, or we'd probably be able to have a conversation about, well, are you having concerns about your student? And here are the resources on campus that you should direct them to. But I would make it more that kind of conversation where I would look to us on campus to say, like, well, here are the resources that are available to your student. And if your student seems to be struggling, or your student seems to be not getting the right kind of guidance, how can we collaborate to make sure that there are plenty of people on campus that can help them course correct in their work, whether that's the Dean of Academic Advising, who's a very good place to start, or individual faculty members who are the instructors of courses, or faculty advisors, or the Writing Center, or the Math and Science Skills Center. So as a general rule, like, the default is your student is here as like an adult, so the information that we have about their academic progress, we communicate to them. But we're very happy to talk to parents about like what resources are available generally to students who are at Kenyon, and to strategize about how to have those conversations. So I would frame it that way, like, how do you have a conversation up front with your student about like what you think is a good cadence for conversation about academic progress? I know a long time ago when I went to college starting in 1984, a good cadence was my parents dropped me off and expected me to graduate 4 years later and didn't want to hear anything be in that period, but I don't think that's the appropriate cadence probably anymore. So it's a thing to talk about with your students, really, and to ask us about the various kinds of support that are available.
Thank you, Jeff. I will say, and I think you all know this because you made the decision to send your children here to Kenyon, but there are many, one of the beauties of being at a residential liberal arts college is there are many resources built in to support your students, and you should encourage them to seek those resources, whether it's through their faculty advisor, through Student Affairs, through the Cox Center for Health and Counseling. And I think, as Jeff mentioned, reaching out to folks and letting, if you have questions about what resources are available, please don't hesitate to contact us. But we really want to empower the students to reach out and access those resources on their own, because it really is on them to work to improve their, whatever that may be, academic progress, mental health. We're here, we have plenty of resources for them, and they should access them. So, and any questions, we can direct them. Let's see, we've got some more questions. We have a question about whether international students can take part in the summer programs, or if there are additional visa requirements. Jeff, I'm guessing that we would recommend that student reach out to the Office of Global Engagement for details on anything specific that they're interested in.
Yeah, I think the short answer is reach out to the Center for Global Engagement, but I know in general, international students have been ample participants in summer science and in the James Cancer Center, Pelotonia. I mean, that there have been lots of international students who have participated, so I don't think there are any specific impediments, but yeah, talk to the Center for Global Engagement.
Wonderful. Let's see. A parent has brought up a question about our endowment. So the recognition that some colleges are facing difficult moments with their endowments, and some questions about the strength of Kenyon's endowment. So if you haven't seen in our website, we just completed a very large and comprehensive campaign that we raised $532 million, and a very successful campaign. 140 million of that was directed very specifically to endowment. So through our fundraising and our strong investment returns, our endowment has grown to about 600 million. Which is a strong endowment for a college our size, and maybe not the strongest in the nation, but a strong endowment. And we use that endowment in many ways, but as a primary way, we use that to fund and provide access to Kenyon through scholarship. So much of our fundraising in our campaign, and I see that Janet has put a link in there to the news on our campaign closure, which we will be celebrating at the end of this month, or at the end of October, here on campus. But again, one of the hallmarks has been a capital campaign that helped fund some of the new buildings that you see on campus throughout this campaign: the library, West Quad, South Campus housing, the 2 new dorms, and very much about providing access and scholarships has been a huge priority of our fundraising efforts here at Kenyon. Let's see. Question about COVID vaccines being offered at the health center, and also an update where students can get their COVID and flu vaccines. Celestino, can I throw that to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So historically, we've always done our flu and COVID vaccine clinic in late October, early November. The reason for this is we work with our partners in Knox Public Health to do this. So we're going to be working on the same timeline as well for this fall. So your students should watch for more information about when that exact date is going to occur. In addition to that, I think if somebody is feeling a little bit anxious and they want to get that done sooner rather than later, say in town in Mount Vernon at CVS or something of that nature, absolutely, they can do that on their own. They don't need to wait for us. I would just encourage you to let them know that they don't need a vehicle to get into Mount Vernon. They can take the Knox Area Transit Shuttle, otherwise known as the CAT, and that'll take them into downtown if they want to make sure they get that. But otherwise, keep their eyes peeled for the clinic that's going to happen here later on this fall.
Right, thank you. Okay, the question, since we talked about the exciting new dorms, there's been some questions about who gets to live in them and what's the process for how the students can move into those dorms. So please, Celestino, can you give us a little bit of information on that?
You bet. And so this weekend, we're going to have actually the ribbon cutting at the first residence hall that's going to open down south. So 2 of them are opening up down there. That new one is going to have 104 beds. They are all 4- and 6-person apartments. So that means that this fall semester, your students will be able to enter into what's known as a supplemental room draw. So if they currently live in Caples, if they live in the NCAs, if they live in Hannah, they can actually go into a draw and actually move mid-year with that. So if Jane Doe is actually selected to live in that new residence hall, Jane Doe will move once she's done with her final exams in the fall. This way, in the spring, when she returns in January, she goes right into her new space. Those are going to be done through the traditional process of seniority. So the higher you are in terms of senior, junior, sophomore, first year, the better chance you have at making an apartment. So they're going to be offered by group. So rather than Jane Doe going in as one, she's going to need a group of either 3 other friends or 5 other friends. So that'll be the supplemental room draw. And that process in terms of seniority basis will actually be replicated this spring when we do housing for the fall semester of 25 and spring of 26. So the difference being in fall of 25, there will be 2 new residence halls open. The new one that will open January of 25, plus a second tower that'll be online. That second tower will have 100 beds. So you're going to have 204 students that are going to be very much so living in the lap of luxury, and we're really excited about that.
Thank you. Very exciting. Okay, a question about summer programs, about what the deadlines are, how students apply for the summer programs, working with professors and research programs. Is the work paid? Is it eligible for funding? Jeff, I'm going to throw this one to you.
Yeah, usually there are some general information sessions at the beginning of the spring semester. Usually there are deadlines in early February. The programs vary a little bit, but that's the typical timeline for them. And they are supported. The students receive housing and stipends, and so there aren't additional costs related to them. And there's a little bit of variety in terms of the programs, but really selection and application is something that you'd be looking at the kind of early part of the spring semester for the summer programs.
Thank you. I think it looks like we're looking ahead to holidays and transportation to and from Columbus Airport. Both, I think there's a question about whether or not there are shuttles available both for Thanksgiving and for Christmas. So I was going to toss that to you, Celestino. I know we just had this conversation with our counterparts in student council yesterday for dinner, but please.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we in fact do airport shuttles to Columbus for Thanksgiving break, winter break, and also spring break. And students can partake in those for $5 each way. That's it. The bus leaves right in front of McBride multiple times a day leading up to the break, and then also multiple times returning from those. So I can't say enough about how much we've partnered with student council and how wonderful leaders they are, because they saw value in this. They wanted to continue. So we're very much so happy about that continuing.
Thank you. And just as an idea of how we collaborate with our students, all of us on senior level staff last night had dinner with our student council representatives, where we had conversations about proposals and requests, and the kinds of things that they feel like as representatives of the student body can enhance their experience. So it was an opportunity for all of us, all the vice presidents, and myself and Jeff as provost, to sit with the students and have them talk to us about the concerns and issues of their students. It's always very informative for us, and a great opportunity for us to have some dialogue back and forth and hear from the students directly what's meaningful to them. And what matters in terms of their quality of life. One of the things that came up on that call, frankly, was about having more social spaces to hang out. So that's something we're working on with them as a next step. So we've got many more questions than we have time. So I'm gonna maybe take one last question here. And that maybe is about the complete. So there's a question about with the completion of the new residential hall, since we talked about that. And maybe the possibility of removing Meadow Lane residents. Some of you may know those were temporary residents that we built during COVID housing. So Celestino, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about that as something we're in active conversations about, clearly, but.
Very much so. And I appreciate the question because I think the element to Meadow Lane being, one of these sort of odd fits within the residential profile is very much so apt. So indeed, they are temporary and they were not intended at all to be permanent, and they're not going to be permanent. I think for us, what we want to make sure we do is we transition well from them. So that just doesn't mean necessarily having more beds come online like we talked about with the 2 residence halls. But part of what we're wanting to do with our Vice President for Sustainability and Grounds, Ian Smith, we're actually trying to find the right partner that we can give those to. That's an important, I think, step for the college to make certain that we're being good citizens here in the area. But yes, those are going to be temporary. They're continuing to be not something that is part of our long-term plans in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, I was trying to quickly summarize a couple of the last questions quickly. I think question about the FERPA waiver, Jeff, is that something that the students have to review, renew annually if they're interested in doing that? You know?
I think the answer is yes to that. And the person to get any additional information about it would be from Ellen Harbert, the registrar. But yeah, my understanding is it has to be renewed annually.
Okay, and I think there's some questions about whether students are able to get their first choice classes, and I think we would refer those students back to their academic advisor to see if they can work with them to get some help, but certainly continue to work on that and let us know if there's other issues that keep coming up. Thank you. I think we fit this all in an hour and covered a lot of ground. Thank you again to Nikki and Brian for introducing us and for all that you do to support parents. And if you want to know how to be involved parents, they are role models. Please reach out to them. And thank you to Celestino Limas for all that you do and supporting our students, and to you, Jeff, as provost, and supporting our academic programs. And thank you all for joining us. We are an incredible community of students, but parents supporting your students is really important to us. We're here to support you through this journey and to celebrate you and your students' success. We hope we'll see many of you for Parents Weekend and enjoy the beginning of fall. Thank you very much for joining us.